Definition 1.
Well, strictly speaking, it's an industry which is dominated by one firm. So, a one-firm industry. But the word is used a bit more loosely than that, so, it also applies if you have an industry with a really highly concentrated industry of 1, 2, or 3 firms.
Definition 2.
Well, this term is used when there's more than one firm in a highly concentrated industry. Strictly speaking, this should be used when there are only 2, 3, or 4 firms operating in the industry.
Definition 3.
Well, the railway companies are an example, or the network industries would be another example. So is the supply of gas. If you have all the pipes, it wouldn't make sense to have a couple of companies competing in the same field.
Definition 4.
I'd define it as a market in which there are many firms producing the same product, which means that because there's so many of them in the industry as a whole, none of them has any market power and can't influence the price.
Definition 5.
Well, I'd understand it as the general context in which a business is operating. Like, rivals of the firm, the characteristics of the customers of the firm, the regulatory environment, the general economic climate, and so on.
Track 3.
What connections are there between the world of competitive sport and competitive business?
I think there's certainly lessons to be learnt from professional competitive sports, like motor racing and the way it involves people and teamwork. I have a colleague called Mark Durand, who's written a book on the Oxford-Cambridge boat race and preparing for it. And he's drawn all kinds of indications for leadership and managing teams out of that. There are also oligopolies in professional sports. Well, certainly there are some football clubs which have a lot of market power, Real Madrid or Manchester United.
Yes.
It's to do with brand and has to do with lots and lots of support and history and all the rest of it. So, within particular sports, there certainly are teams that have more market power. It's interesting that the situation is different in American football, where they have rules to make it more competitive. Effectively, the weaker teams get first choice of the draft every year when they're getting new players in. And that's to make the playing field more level. In football in Europe, the playing field's not very level.
Track 4.
Let's go back to monopolies and oligopolies. Why are they considered uncompetitive and undesirable?
Well, the standard argument is that the trouble with monopolies is that because they have market power, they will restrict output and raise the price, which obviously is not good news from the consumer's point of view. The reason they do that is they can get higher profits by doing so. However, there are industries in which it makes sense to have a few very large firms, and that would be the case in natural monopolies. No. However, there are industries in which it makes sense to have a few very large firms, and that would be the case in natural monopolies, where you can't have a competitive environment simply because there's not enough scope in the market, or it's too expensive to set up a number of firms with the upfront investment that's required.
OK, so monopolies and oligopolies are at one end of the spectrum, and we've got perfect competition at the other. In your opinion, do you think it's possible to create markets where there is perfect competition?
Perfect competition is an ideal, and creating perfect competition in the textbook sense with no transaction costs and perfect information and all the rest of it, that's never going to happen. However, I think it is possible to bring markets closer to the perfectly competitive ideal, and the way to do that might be to reduce entry barriers, for example, and make it easier for firms to compete. So you get something closer to a competitive environment.
Track 5.
Tell me, last night...
Yeah?
A good meal out in Aachen?
Yes.
Was it?
We went to the same restaurant where we had dinner with Ada and Ton.
At the Lycée?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, Lycée.
Yeah,
Downstairs or upstairs?
in the garden.
Oh, I haven't been there. I must go sometime. Good?
Very. You should go sometime. It's quite reasonable.
And great food?
Oh, great, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit jealous, actually. I had a bowl of cereal last night.
Oh, I had my mum's wonderful stew last night.
And only a few more meals to go, Elton. And then you're all by yourself. Well, I think we should make a start.
Track 6. 1,
The hotel was fine.
2,
The hotel was fine.
3,
The hotel was fine.
4,
The hotel was fine.
5,
The hotel was fine.
Track 7.
Well, the flight was okay, but the hotel was terrible.
Track 8. 1,
I think people will be more mobile, traveling between countries, and as a result the demand for goods may grow together, as tastes across different countries converge, so there may be more global products like Coca-Cola, which is drunk all over the world.
2,
We will need to look to Asia if we want to look for future development in an economic field. We have China, we have India. They are extremely large markets and players.
3,
Regarding the EU, I believe there is a certain resistance to further increase the size of the EU significantly in the next 10 years. It takes time to integrate new countries, to stabilize them. At one point, we may even see Russia join the EU, but I believe that is something which is some time away.
4,
In the field of e-business, I believe we are just in the starting phase, or maybe at the end of the starting phase, if you wish. I think in future we will see that marketing and selling online will probably grow much further, particularly in certain fields of business like retail. The only inhibitor may be that we find a certain level where people get fed up with too much technology and want to go back to the previous face-to-face business relationships.
5,
I think that the subject of CO2 emissions will remain very high on the agenda, and it'll probably be the dominating subject over the next few years to come in business boardrooms.
Track 9.
I imagine that future planning must be very important for an industry like the automotive industry, where the lead time for product development can be very long.
To develop new models from scratch, it takes between 2 and 4 years. It may even be a bit more.
The world's going to be a very different place in 3 or 4 years' time. So future forecasting and prediction becomes pretty strategic, doesn't it?
That's absolutely right, and that's always the problem with introducing new products in such kind of industries with complex products. It takes quite some time. It's a much longer lead time than with other highly technological products like mobile phones or things like that. And therefore, you always have to look into the future to avoid mistakes and increase the probability of success.
Some companies have been very successful in anticipating future threats and opportunities, and some have not. I wonder if you could give us some examples of when companies have got it right and when they've got it wrong.
Well, this is a very interesting and difficult question because if we look at history, there were people who were intuitively dealing with developing certain products. We can now talk about the electronic or microelectronic industry. Somebody like Bill Gates got it right with his expectation that every single person wants to have a computer in front of them. And of course, there are other important companies in that field, such as Apple. They get it right because they have an understanding of what people basically want and they have a vision. And well, there are other companies that have not always made the right decisions, and I have to say that some of the difficulties of some automotive companies are because they have underestimated and misunderstood the potential effects in the field of CO2 and energy, which have now come higher up the agenda.
They were still producing cars which were producing a lot of CO2 emissions, which were inefficient.
Exactly. The American automotive industry, for example, has made some misjudgments in that field. There are other automotive companies around the world that may have read the future more correctly, but at the end of the day we need to be clear about one thing, that decisions are made in boardrooms, and it comes down very often simply to the opinions of those who make the decisions. And therefore I believe that the methods which we can apply to forecast the future, or at least get a better understanding of what may happen, and to prepare for that, are one important aspect. But they are not the decision. It comes down finally to the decision makers in business.
Track 10. Exercise 2. 1. A.
I guess they may come back to me.
B.
We may subcontract that to a partner.
2. A.
Noel will stop on Thursday as well, won't he?
B.
Things will change.
3. A.
We will definitely sign the contract.
B.
We might well find a solution during the meeting.
4. A.
You're going to need a firewall.
B.
I suppose it's how many you think you might need in Ireland.
Track 11.
We may subcontract that to a partner.
Track 12.
Okay, we may as well start. So, our Windows operating system. We've been using our present OS in Japan for at least 4 years, and it's time to upgrade. It's more a question of what will happen if we don't upgrade, because as many of you know, Microsoft has already stopped support for the present OS, and we're in the extended support phase. So, just to give you a bit of background. Mainstream support for the present system expired in the middle of last year. We paid Microsoft $50,000 for an extended support contract, and we still have to pay Microsoft $350 an hour if we have any engineering for the present system. And as you can imagine, as time goes by, that figure's going to go up. Obviously, this creates a business risk for us because current software and hardware used by us is no longer supported by our vendors. The vendors are all migrating their products to the new system, and they're not supporting the one we presently use anymore. The longer we wait, the greater this risk becomes. We've already seen this with certain products on our desktops, and also more recently with our new Dell Standard Workstation. It doesn't actually give support. So why do we really want to upgrade, besides the impact of not doing it? Well, we want to reduce the risk of maintaining and the cost of maintaining our outdated desktop environment. There is also the importance of global consistency, too. A common desktop build allows the development teams to develop to a common desktop, as opposed to what we do now, which is we always ask, oh, what do they use in that region? And having to tailor your product or have the support teams tailor their desktop so that your application will work in that place. So, what is our basic approach going to be in Japan? On all previous desktop rollouts, we've been able to do it in one fell swoop. We've been able to plan for all desktops as a whole. We have bought a big bunch of disks, built the new operating system in advance, and just swapped them all. But we can't do that this time, because this time we're being forced to implement the new system on a departmental basis. Some departments simply might say, no, we cannot afford it. And some departments might say, I wanted one yesterday. And that's exactly what has happened. But because we're being forced to adopt this approach, it really dictates the basic approach that we need to take. So, how do we start? Well, I've already done this. I have solicited the stakeholders, which is you guys, and support. Then we need to sit with the department heads and analyze the costs and the risks, and decide whether or not to proceed. And assuming that for a given department we get approval to proceed, then we need to get it signed off and proceed as follows, which is to actually begin fixing the applications so that they work.
Track 13.
Applications so that they work. Okay, any questions?
The global implementation of the new OS interests me. Has anyone else done it? So, for example, if our head office in Los Angeles has got some departments on the new OS, are they able to influence the implementation here or give us some advice?
So you mean you want to know about whether other people have experienced any problems that we can learn from? Is that right?
Yeah, basically.
I don't think there's a black and white answer to that. It's being funded and deployed globally.
Okay.
Track 14.
What are the functions and purposes of employee pay from the company's point of view?
Well, one could write a book on that. The first function, though, is to attract someone to do the job. There is a demand for labour on the part of the company, and the wage is how the company pulls the employees in. And then a second function would be to motivate employees, because we think that employees like money. Of course, we all like money, and the more of it we have, the harder we work. Of course, the pay scheme has to be structured so that effort is rewarded. So those are the two: to fill the job and to motivate the workers.
What are the different reward systems that companies can use to pay their staff in order to hold and attract workers?
Well, we distinguish two basic types of reward systems. One's a reward system based on time, with payment by the hour. The other method is payment according to effort, or on output and performance. We can call this an incentive pay scheme. In this case, people have a basic rate of pay, and then the rest of the pay is tied to how much they do. I mean, an example that's often in the news is paying chief executives share options, which are geared to the share price, which is thought to be in the chief executive's control. And another way would be to pay apple pickers by the apple, or coal miners by the kilogram of coal.
Track 15.
What are the advantages and disadvantages of these different reward systems?
Well, there are different advantages and disadvantages. There is a cost involved in paying people by time, as you have to try to ensure that people work by supervising them. But the advantage of payment by time is that it's simple, and also you don't have to think of what to tie the payment to. This brings me to the disadvantage of the payment according to output. You have to find a measure of output that produces the desired results for the company. To take the apple picker, you pay them by the number of apples picked. Well then, the apple picker might just choose to throw the apples into the back of the truck and bruise them, as he only cares about the number of apples. But that, perhaps, isn't so bad. The worst case, of course, is when you pay executives according to the share price. They have an incentive to take all sorts of risky accounting decisions to make the share price high.
Yes, as we have seen.
So you can twist incentives to suit your own personal benefit. The advantage of payment by output is that you get more effort. The disadvantage is that you tend to get a sort of gaining of the system, if you like, that's inevitable. So I suppose most systems are imperfect, and pay systems are too. Many jobs simply don't lend themselves to payment by output, and so inevitably payment according to time also needs including. I mean, as a university professor, I am sort of paid by output. The number of articles I write or the books I write govern my pay. But I'm also paid by the hour, so it's a sort of mix.
Track 16.
how big a factor is pay in motivating workers?
Well, that's one on which I change my mind every day.
All right.
There's something called the Theory X view of people and the Theory Y view of people. The Theory X view of people is that they are lazy and good for nothing, and they are interested only in pay to make them work. The Theory Y is the opposite, that people are cooperative and kind and they aren't motivated by pay. What they want is a feeling of satisfaction in doing the job well. So, of course, those are the polar extremes.
Yes.
Everyone's a mix. So how big a factor is pay in motivating workers? It's probably surprisingly small. Some people earn enormous sums of money, but that simply indicates how good they are. Some of them would probably work for much less.
Yes, but in most offices, factories or shops, you will always find some people who feel they are getting paid too little for doing too much. Do you think it's really possible to get reward systems which people feel are fair?
Well, fortunately the market decides. I don't really worry too much about fairness, because if you feel you're being paid too little for doing too much, then the answer for you is to quit your job and find a job which suits you better and stop complaining, get moving.
Right.
So, in other words, the market ensures that we get our reward systems right.
OK. I don't know whether I should ask you this next question. It looks a little bit too personal to me.
No. Go ahead.
Oh, good. The question is, do you feel personally that you are rewarded appropriately for the work you do?
Well, I've been in this job for 30 years. If I disliked it...
You would have walked away?
That's right. We're always trying to...
Track 17.
As we get into next year, we might have to develop something that's performance-related.
Well, I'd really welcome that. I mean, I said that last time, and in fact, I actually thought that the performance review was linked to salary. I mean, I have no trouble being assessed on my performance at all.
OK.
Because I know that I'm generating a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Helping to generate a lot of money for RBC.
Yes.
So, fine.
Track 18.
The demands of the job mean that I have to take more responsibility than I was probably originally intended to take, or to have. And I absolutely don't mind that at all.
Mm-hmm.
What it does do is sort of eat into the time, you know, like having to be approachable and flexible, and having to meet clients earlier in the morning, or having to meet them after the working day, or having to work through lunch and all that kind of thing.
Well,
I found this job to be such a challenge that it's meant that I've had to give up the second job that I was doing that was supplementing my income. And the fact that I came here on the salary that I did, I knew I could manage because I was also doing a second job, if you see what I mean.
I wasn't aware of that at the beginning, you know. I didn't know that you had a second job until quite recently.
No. Well, it wasn't something that really impacted on this job when I originally came here. I mean, all the way back in February when we had these sort of early conversations, I was only going to be doing 3 days a week.
Right.
And another thing, when I went on the course to develop business counselling skills, I think it confirmed that the company sees me as a business advisor. And I was equal to some of the business advisors that were also in the room, who were certainly paid probably more than double what I'm being paid. Once I've got through the national standards, I would be able to do the job of business advisor. I'd like to get promotion here, but...
What are you saying?
Please don't think I will, because I won't. But I would be able to get a job as a business advisor in other organisations.
Within Business Link, for example?
Well, starting salaries for business advisors in Business Link are $21,000 a year, and I'm paid an awful lot less than that. And I've been in contact with them.
OK.
I've already talked about it more than I wanted to. It's not a huge issue, but it may become one.
Yes, I know.
My husband's income is still spent in supporting his ex-wife and putting his daughter through university.
Right.
Which means that I'm pretty much solely responsible for keeping my kids in designer trainers and allowances and everything else.
Yes.
I have noticed since I gave up the second job the drop in income.
Well, this will get addressed when we said.
Yeah, right.
It will.
So that's okay. And I wouldn't ever want to be thinking about moving on or doing anything differently without talking about it to you anyway.
No.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm not interested in another role. I really want to develop this one, and that's why I'm working as hard as I am.
Me too. And I seriously want you to take a long-term view of this because it's not that many years down the line when I want to be thinking of retirement.
Yeah.
I want to do it in the right way. And I want to have a proper exit strategy where other people are in place and that kind of thing.
Track 19.
How does Carnegie's CETO technology work?
As you can see from the slide, the waves are moving towards shore and they pass over an array of submerged yellow spheres, quite large spheres that are attached to the top of pumps. As the wave passes over the top of the spheres, the water pressure increases because there's a much greater amount of water actually acting on the spheres. It has maybe 2 or 3 metres more water acting on it. That activates the pumps, which are shown here in yellow below the spheres, and causes the generation of water pressure by the pumps. The pumps are linked together and they force pressurised water through the blue line that you can see onto the shore. It's pumped on shore through the blue line where it drives the Pelton turbine and electrical generator generating electricity. The electricity goes into the wires that you see there, the transmission line. And the electricity then goes off to be used. The water, after it has been through the Pelton turbine, has lost its water pressure, so it has no real pressure left in it. The water runs back underground into the ocean through what is shown in the diagram as a green pipe. The attraction of CETO technology is that it is underwater, but another real advantage is that the electricity generation part of the process is on shore in a protective environment, so there are no electrical installations or electrical generating equipment actually in the ocean. CETO cleverly combines highly innovative technology underwater with proven conventional technology, such as the hydroelectric Pelton wheel turbine on land. This land-based technology has been used for almost 100 years, meaning that the technical risks, once the water pressure is delivered to shore, are quite low.
Track 20.
I understand that Carnegie is now approaching full development of the product with test sites in West Australia. But let me take you back, if I can, to day one for a moment. How was the initial idea developed?
The initial idea came from a gentleman called Alan Burns. Alan developed the CETO concept. He's been a keen diver for most of his life. He has an enormous understanding, appreciation and respect for the sea as a result of spending so much time in there. And he's also very observant and seems to have a good understanding of the forces that operate in the sea. At a particular time when he was on the bottom of the ocean and he was doing some work, he noticed that fish that were at eye level would suddenly go lower or higher as the pressure of the wave going over the top impacted on them. And I guess that got him thinking about the forces that are applying below the ocean and the fact that we have this extraordinary motion going on in our oceans at all times. So he literally did some sketching of basic design concepts when he got onto his boat, and the rest led on to the development of the project.
OK, what makes the development stage successful?
The development stage is all about having the right team and making sure they work together well. Within a team, you need an environment that allows for open communication and listening. As the company grows, there is a need to introduce new blood, new people with new ideas. So you really need an environment where people feel secure enough to talk about what perhaps might seem crazy. Often, crazy ideas can lead on to some amazing breakthroughs.
What about the next stage of the project?
Well, commercial stages, of course, are all important. A new product is absolutely useless if it doesn't have a market. And investors who have put money into developing the technologies are obviously very interested to make sure that the commercial aspects progress so that they can get a return on their investment. Carnegie has established an agreement with a very large French utility company, EDF, to help to distribute the product in the Northern Hemisphere. The involvement of larger companies is useful as they're often better at commercialising innovations because they have greater skills in distribution and they also have more finance to allow the product to achieve its full potential.
Track 21.
The gold support contract is kind of a higher level support contract. So if there are any problems, our guys will go in and solve them and troubleshoot and correct the problem. And that's 24/7, isn't it?
Yep, that's a 24-hour cover.
OK, brilliant.
So, for example, you may not need to have that high level of cover, in which case we can look at putting a lower level of cover in for you.
Yep, makes sense.
With the gold coverage, if one of those servers goes down at 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning, one of our engineers gets paged and he goes in and fixes it.
Great.
So, that's the very highest level of service.
OK.
Which may not be something you need, but, these are all just options.
Well, the important thing is for us to be able to offer it to customers.
Yeah.
Because customers are increasingly saying, we want that 24 cover.
Absolutely.
So?
So, that's really us managing your servers as if they were our own.
Yeah.
Great.
So I think the main difference really with the gold one and the other contract is the fact that with this gold one, we'll actually go in and find the problem out. With the other one, it's pretty much down to you guys to find what the problem is and then get us to correct it.
Yeah, no problem.
That's the main difference, really.
So it's kind of more like just a pair of the right hands, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
OK.
It's really down to different levels of engineers that would actually maintain the system. Obviously, with the gold one, you're getting a senior network engineer.
Right.
It'd be someone who would understand not only networking issues and internet issues, but also the server and your company's issues.
That's right.
OK.
Track 22.
So with the gold option, there's a flat rate of £25,000 per year, plus £50 per incident. So that will cover all the backup.
But that's quite a serious cost on top.
This is the biggest cost.
Yep.
This is the one that we'd have most issue with.
Okay.
Right?
Because obviously it's covered by the service we have at the moment.
Absolutely.
It's something that really sticks in the throat.
Well, we've put the standard cost down there. I think that's probably one of the areas that we could negotiate on if you thought the gold option was the better option.
OK.
It may well be that, there may be an alternative way of doing it perhaps. We actually have all ours done by automated backup service, I think, and that could be a possibility too.
Right.
But obviously there are costs again, so it's almost getting a balance, I think.
OK.
So it may be that there's just a way around it without having to spend that money.
Track 23.
How would you describe Monday Farmer, and how has it changed over your time with the company?
Oh, we have grown a lot. We have more than trebled in the last 8 years. We are today on a global basis probably the largest or second largest family-owned pharmaceutical company in the world. It still has a turnover of around $4 billion, so we are not super small, but we are obviously not a big pharma either. Monday Pharma has a culture of sharing, a lot of friendliness, warm welcomes, exceptional free from politics and backstabbing. Since I joined, I have just seen a continuous and actually quite dramatic improvement of the culture and the way we do business. So we have had success, which helps us to be happy. We have, I think, an outstanding leadership team, and the culture is second to none.
Track 24.
Do you have separate departments within each of those companies?
Yes, we have different associates in different countries, and different departments and functions in our different companies as well. Like in the UK company here, we have R&D, we have production, we have marketing, sales, administration.
Track 25.
Are there also perhaps different styles or cultures in different departments?
We have some examples of where there is such a buzz, such an involvement from people that is almost unreal. For example, marketing. People have so much fun and they love to work together so much that nothing seems to be able to stand in their way in terms of obstacles and challenges. And did I mention a few of the others where we have struggled? It is slightly more difficult in terms of the production units, where we have 3 shifts and they don't travel, compared to the marketing department where they do travel. And they have fun and they do exciting things all the time, right?
So it's partly related to the nature of the work as well.
Partly. I think less so than related to the boss. I think the boss means a lot.
Track 26.
How did Mundi Pharma create such a successful culture?
I'm a big believer in employee surveys. I have been working with those surveys for 15, 16 years. Since I came here, we run one every year across Europe.
Employee surveys?
Well, basically, employee satisfaction surveys. Engagement surveys with a set of questions that are very much linked and correlated with customer satisfaction. And also with a general sort of theory and knowledge about what makes people tick. What makes them engaged and willing to contribute to an organization. And we have seen an absolutely phenomenal development since I joined the group, in terms of the culture, the spirit. So if you look out, we started roughly 6 or 7% below industry benchmarks, and now we're running 7-8% above. So that's the kind of evolution we've had in our company culture and the way we have operated over the last 7 or 8 years.
Track 27.
Why is the process so useful, and what changes have taken place in that period of time?
The important thing is that the process forces people to talk to each other. It forces managers to sit down and listen to employees, because they have so much to say and so much to contribute if you are willing to listen and take the time to do so. I'll tell you, it's remarkable. I just talked to a guy yesterday who was new on this floor, and it's always interesting to speak to new people who have been here for only a couple of months. It's always very interesting to listen to the new eyes. What do you see? What surprises you here? What has struck you as odd? What do you particularly like? And almost without exception, what I get back is that everybody is so friendly, and everybody is so willing to share and help. And it sounds a bit corny, but it's actually true. It is an incredibly positive and welcoming environment. But it wasn't easy in the beginning, because I had to force people to do this. Because most managers are a bit afraid of this, right? It's a bit scary. It reveals weaknesses. So initially we heard from the managers, shall we do this? I don't believe in that. And the year after, when I said we were going to do it again, they said, well, can we wait for another year? Let's give us an 18-month gap so we can really do things. And I said no.
No.
Not up for discussion. It is every year at the same time. Get used to it. And if you ask them today, I think they would all say that they want to continue the way we're doing it.
Track 28.
Something we need to work forward to is improving the attitude of the technical team. If this is going to happen, to be honest with you, Doz, their attitude's got to be customer. You know, good morning, this is your salary talking, is very much going to be the way it'll go forward. Which may be alien to a technical individual because they're very much, we know what's best. You know, arrogance is an unfair word, but they can come across like this as they only focus on the technical and don't help the customer. But the trouble is, if you enter into the world of project management, there's a completely different attitude.
Right.
All I'm saying is that the attitude has got to slightly change.
Having discussed it with them, it's mostly about ownership, I think.
What do you mean?
You know, the technical people don't feel as if they're really part of this process.
Oh.
Track 29.
I think, to be honest with you, Doz, the technical team, if they're going to manage these projects, they've got to be proactive rather than reactive. And I think they've got to be very customer-facing, and their attitude has got to change, which is what I just said. Is that okay?
I don't think there's a problem with their attitude, because when they do speak to customers, I don't really have an issue with how they speak to them.
No, I'm not saying that.
I just kind of feel that they don't ever feel as if it's their problem.
Yes, that's what I mean. Their attitude is...
It's someone else's problem?
Yes. They've got to now become project-orientated.
But don't forget, they're taking calls from customers all the time that they're out there.
I'm not saying that. I think they're fabulous with customers. What I'm saying is that if the customer doesn't ring them back in 10 minutes' time, they've got to ring them again.
Right.
Track 30.
I'm just saying that when you do get a change like this, it's very important that everybody changes with it.
Okay.
And that people take problem ownership.
Yes, I mean, that's a big part of this.
And then you've got a sales-type technical person who will think like a salesperson.
Right.
And they'll think, hang on, the customer's my salary. I better think about this.
I agree. But I think it's just one of those things here. They'll find lots of excuses not to do it, and for some reason, there does seem to be a reluctance to speak to customers directly when they're not call controllers.
It's a mindset change. There's going to have to be a mindset change.
And, you know, like you say to Doug, oh, can you phone the customer and tell him what you've just told me? And he'll mail them instead. And you kind of think, why don't you just pick up the phone?
It's because they don't want to talk to them.
Well, yes.
They're two different types of beasts, sales and techies.
Track 31.
So the general question is, what is rapport management and in what situations is it important?
Yes, OK. I see rapport management as managing relations, whether they're smooth or turbulent, whether it's harmonious or problematic. And so rapport is the extent to which you're getting on with the other person. And rapport management, then, is strategies for doing that. Why is it important? Well, it's not just important in intercultural interaction. In any context, really. You need to be able to get on well with people if you're to work well together.
Track 32.
How do you see face, and how does it relate to the issue of rapport management?
How the rapport goes is dependent on a few things, and face is one of them. Because face is an aspect of our identity. The image that we want to convey to others, or we want people to perceive us as. And so there are different aspects of our identity. And if you think about us all having multiple identities, we want to be competent. We may want to be seen as attractive. It could be a whole range of things, slightly different for different people. And so if somebody says something that challenges the quality that we regard ourselves as having or wanting to have, and they evaluate us negatively, that is a challenge to our self-image. And of course, if it's in front of other people, that's even more difficult to take. And then, naturally, you will tend to have the emotions that go with it, embarrassment and so on. And so that is likely to have some impact on rapport. And the other side of things with rapport is that I think it's not only just face, but sometimes, you know, we have expectations as to what is proper behaviour, or the things that I have the right to expect. And if I don't get that, it might not be a direct attack on my personal qualities. I don't feel a sense of loss of face, but I may feel irritated or angry because I feel my rights have not been upheld.
Track 33.
Can you give us any examples of where someone has felt a loss of face due to cultural differences?
Yeah, I'll give you one from the e-China programme between British and Chinese universities. So it's an intercultural one as well. What I and most of the other project managers did when we were sending emails, we would copy in, or just include in the recipient list, all the people to whom that email was relevant, and leave out those that we thought it was not relevant for. And we did that for a while, and then after about 6 months or something, one of the Chinese project managers sent me an email and said, "You've been copying everybody into the emails, and this in many ways is a good thing to do, but you shouldn't always do this in China. You have copied in the leader. And by copying him in, you've treated him as if he is the same level as his subordinates."
That's interesting.
So he was saying, you shouldn't actually do that because you've caused him to lose face. So he hasn't been given the deference of status he was expecting. So there was both a loss of face, but also probably his role rights have been challenged because, in his understanding, he would have the right to expect a different email because of his status.
Track 34.
What advice would you give to a new multicultural work team, given the responsibility for developing the guidelines for creating a successful work and social group?
The first guidelines you come up with in your kick-off meeting, your first phase of face-to-face meetings, won't be the last guidelines. There's a fairly well-known formula of how teams actually get to a stage where they're working effectively and successfully. And most teams, especially multicultural teams, go through stages of forming, which generally leads to storming. And storming is when people say, well, I didn't really know that this was going to happen, or yes, I agreed with the guidelines at first, but they're not really working for us here now. So there's change or realignment, which has to happen on any guidelines for the team to work effectively, which leads to norming when the team makes the realignment official, which then, finally, hopefully within the first 3 months, leads to performing. So the quicker you get through storming to norming, the better, which means the first set of guidelines will, if you're going to be successful, have to be looked at again and revised. So expect to get into that kind of realignment work at some point in the team's history. And also, don't make your initial guidelines too strict.
Track 35.
So I think here I definitely need something to be able to say to my head office, we're going to go ahead and do this checking. Peter's my man, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because one of the pieces of feedback Peter gave at the last technical meeting was, firstly, probably he's not too keen to share this information with us, and I've got to understand why, and he's not here to say yes or no, so it's probably a bit unfair to explore that, but I did get the impression that it was like, well, we're not going to be checking this on a monthly basis. Now, for me, that immediately scared me. Did we go over the top at Staines by checking it every month? I don't know. You could probably have done it every 2 months and kept things moving, but you can't just say at the beginning of the year, we'll do a quick check and stop there.
Well,
Track 36. A.
I believe for any senior executive, any manager of an operation or a business unit, this is part of their job. It's not an optional area. So the first thing is, what does it mean? It means it's actually about doing my job every day as an executive within the Laird Group.
B.
I think this is something that's often overplayed, but international differences are something that should be taken into consideration. I think in essence, all people respond to an environment where they're treated with respect. They're involved, they're rewarded for good performance, they're given clear direction and strong leadership.
C.
I believe people generally don't resist change necessarily. What they resist is having change done to them, if you like, change that's forced upon people. But there are various people that are resistant to this, and there is a tough side. My belief here is that one should be hard on the issue and fair on the person.
D.
I think the critical thing here is that at every stage, a lot depends on the commitment of the leadership as to whether a program will be successful.
Track 37.
So the need for change is not always welcome or understood. Who and what have been the main resistors to change in your context?
I believe people generally don't resist change necessarily. What they resist is having change done to them, if you like, change that's forced upon people. But there are various people that are resistant to this, and there is a tough side. My belief here is that one should be hard on the issue and fair on the person.
Yes.
So the first thing is, the most important thing here is the way an organisation communicates, educates and converses with all of the members of staff. help everybody understand that, if you like, the rules of combat, the requirement of business today is that we change. But part of this approach is the idea that the people in the organisation need to be part of the change process. In other words, they will be involved in contributing to the change. And when people get some ownership of the change that's taking place, I believe the resistance diminishes.
Right.
I think people need to understand the issue that a business needs to change to survive, and if people block that, then it does need to be addressed with a firm line. But I believe generally, within the right culture of a company, that there will only be a very small minority who resist.
Track 38.
How did you successfully implement change and overcome resistance?
I think the critical thing here is that at every stage, a lot depends on the commitment of the leadership as to whether a program will be successful. If an organisation doesn't have a genuine belief and commitment from the very top, then any form of change program becomes very difficult. Also, if I speak about my experience over the 3 years in Beijing with an organisation of 4,000 people and some huge improvement activity that's gone on, the first thing that needs to be done is to establish what I call the basic principles, the way of doing business. And, if you like, these are codes of conduct, so everybody understands how, within the company, we're going to try and behave. And there are 5 points that I passionately believe in. The first is to create a blame-free culture, as I said earlier, hard on the issue, fair on the person. The second one is maintaining the self-confidence and respect of others, a better focus on team working, and here the concept of the internal and external customer becomes critical. Meaning that we all understand the external customer who buys our products or services, but also the idea that each of us are customers to each other within the organisation. A strong focus on action, rewarding and recognising people who get things done, rather than people that talk about getting things done. And then finally, understanding that we try and set the right example. So there is a strong emphasis on all the managers leading by example. But I think this has helped a lot. And then one other area is to establish some core values within the company. And the critical thing here is that this does not become wallpaper or posters that are put up in conference rooms. So what we did in Beijing was we involved 500 or 600 members of staff and employees down to the operator level to pool what to them and all the people in the company were the core values that they believe they want to find from a company that would mean something to them.
Right.
Ultimately, the people in the organisation, the management team and the leaders, down to production supervisors and shift leaders, people that make the improvements and make this happen, need to be encouraged, recognised and rewarded for that. But an organisation must have a genuine belief and commitment from the very top. If it doesn't, any form of change programme can be very difficult.
Track 39.
Absolutely. We at First Pharma are very happy with that.
Moving on, the next point is First Pharma complaints, okay, Ada?
Yeah.
Right. Carl has told me that we've actually had 5 complaints here.
Have we?
Yes. Now, that hasn't been picked up in my monthly report, so I need to ensure that Carl's feeding in the information. It may be that 2 or 3 of them were prior to the beginning of this year, but he says there have been 5 in total. So, for example, there's a compliance complaint, and then the stock out page. Helen, run us through what stock out page means, if you would.
Basically, it means how many markets have been out of stock for the period.
Yes.
How many markets have been out of stock, the total days that they were out of stock. So, for the 5 markets, it was 40 days in total. So the average is 8 days. That's the average.
Track 40.
To be honest, I'm not very happy with the description as First Pharma stock out. That means, from my point of view, that we at First Farmer will be responsible for any stock out. But this will not show if the market information from you at ABC has provided the wrong figures for production.
Oh, well, what we used to do at ABC head office was we used to have a number of markets out of stock, and then we used to split it down.
Okay.
I think that's a fair comment from Ada, because what we're not saying here is if you know whether or not it's ABC or First Farmer's fault. On a monthly basis, we should be root causing why and understanding, is this market driven or is it production driven? You know, something like that. So I think we've got to know the reasons why, and maybe there's got to be a comments column underneath so people don't look at it and get the wrong impression. Because, as you say, your first reaction was First Farmer stockouts. What have we at First Farmer done wrong this year?
Yeah, but it would be interesting to see what we can do to make it better in the future.
Track 41.
Yeah, but it's the same issue with compliance. What does First Farmer compliance mean? It's the same. We have not made any compliance mistakes at First Farmer. There is a reaction from the customer saying they're not happy. I have an example. Today at First Farmer we received material not in a temperature-controlled lorry. I'm sorry, but we are not responsible for that. That is a customer complaint, and ABC is responsible for that.
I'm not sure.
Maybe we can make a separate line and write compliance complaint or complaint by customer or whatever.
Okay, I think I might have missed something. So we can add an extra line to detail the complaint?
Yeah, good.
When it's our fault there's a complaint, we need to put our hands up and say it was our issue at ABC.
Okay.
Track 2. Extract 1.
To work down where there is building and excavation going on, we could only use civilianized military tanks. They are actually like tractors, but are a type of tank. It was quite a funny experience. But for everything else, like going from the office to workshops, we used four-wheel drive cars, Land Rovers, Land Cruisers, things like that. And of course, the Russian Niva. It's unbelievable. And I had never thought that this car could survive in that place. But it did.
Extract 2.
In the early stage, everything connected to the negotiation is relevant, such as negotiation on the price of oil. It's also at this stage when you discuss pre-designs and when you're actually pre-estimating your costs and budgets and everything. Every single mistake during the early stages will impact hugely on your future project. And also at this time, it's very easy to change your mistakes, to repair everything. I mean, on paper. It doesn't cost you a lot.
Extract 3.
A part of the pipeline was built in Malaysia, painted in the Philippines, and then reconstructed again at the Hyundai factory in South Korea before being shipped to Sakhalin Island. It was really interesting.
Extract 4.
In the summer, it's about 25 to 30 degrees plus. But in the winter, it can be a nightmare. -30 with a strong wind, which makes work really hard. The island airport can be closed for up to 2 weeks because of the snow.
So do you still have to work when it's -30 on site?
It depends on the type of work.
So what type of work goes on?
If it's welding, you can't work. But if it's answering emails in the office, you have to work.
Extract 5.
A big problem we have is the type of materials we need to use in the cold climate. So, during operations, it can really impact on your facility if you have not ordered the right material in order to work under these conditions. Starting from small bolts right up to massive casts. Everything has to be made for an Arctic climate. And of course, this makes your project double in cost.
Extract 6.
Fortunately, during my period, there was no major incident because we had a really strong HSE department. For the construction people, it was really hard to work in harmony with HSE people. But fortunately, due to their influence on our project, there were no major injuries. When they informed us there would be a temperature drop, we closed our facility and brought our people back from site, which helped to prevent a lot of problems.
Extract 7.
In the evening, what do you do in a place like Sakhalin?
Unfortunately, our site was in the middle of nowhere. There were no leisure facilities. We had only one terrible billiard table. There was nothing there. In our camp, we had only one TV with one Russian channel, which was the culture channel of Russia, and about 15 channels in Japanese. But we couldn't understand that at all.
Track 3.
What problems do you have when you work with multinational teams? Is it just language problems, or are there other problems?
First of all, there is the language problem. But if you avoid this problem by having a bilingual project manager, he or she can easily speak with his or her own team. The second issue, finally, is food. If you've got 15 or 16 nationalities, what food will you give them? The European people would like to have European, etc. But when you have a nice setup, the HR department can assist you and help the project managers.
Can you think of an example where human resources really helped a multicultural team work together?
Yes. Let me give you an example from a BP project I was working on in Azerbaijan. The HR department organized a lot of team parties, plus some sort of recreation. But sometimes they organized lunch with different menus. They advised the catering company to bring food for the different nationalities, so you could eat whatever you wanted.
Are there any problems where the senior manager is from a different country to most of the engineers in the project?
Well, I don't think so. If the manager is a nice and polite person, I don't think there will be a problem.
How can you encourage good teamwork and commitment?
By providing good working conditions, listening to the team. You have brought on board different professionals from many disciplines. You have to listen to them. I'd also say that good teamworking culture can come from having a team party at least once a month. Yes, definitely. When you have a team party, it makes people socialize and understand each other.
Track 4.
Well, I mean, we fully support that, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Right. OK, well, that might be a cheaper thing for us to do.
OK.
Right.
So we need to get those figures to you. We should be able to get those to you this afternoon or tomorrow.
Whenever, there's no hurry.
No?
No, just fit them in around what else you do. But it's just useful information for us.
OK.
Yeah.
No problem.
Great.
So I guess the best way forward is to just kind of leave you to sort of digest this. And then, we'll perhaps wait for you to come back to us about the next stage. I'm sure you're going to have some more questions.
Probably.
Really, it's just about making this make sense for you and for us.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm sure with all this stuff, there's a way of doing it where it's going to please us all. But I think next time we'll just get together and we'll work everything out then.
Great.
OK?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much.
OK, right.
And I think we've got a football match the week after next, haven't we?
Yes, I spoke to Raj.
Is that here?
Yeah.
Track 5.
What is e-marketing and how is it different to standard marketing?
Right, OK. E-marketing's a widely used term used to cover a wide variety of approaches, so there isn't a clear single definition. Essentially, though, I would define it as the use of electronic media for marketing purposes. Electronic media usually means the internet, but it can also tie in to include email, mobile phone marketing, and so on. In one way, it has radically changed marketing because it means you can have a much closer relationship with the customer. In another way, though, it's an extension of marketing. You're using the same approaches that you would traditionally use in marketing, but just using them through different channels.
Track 6.
Presumably, you use online advertising and communication channels in those countries where the internet is that much more popular.
Yes, exactly. A country like South Korea, for example, has huge broadband penetration and, a great usage of IT, versus some of your developing countries where it's not so great. If people are used to receiving communications through their PC, you do that through e-marketing, because there's a distinct advantage to it potentially. You can move very quickly, you can get a message out very quickly, so you can scale your business very profitably, but you can also track the effectiveness of it in a very simple and clear way. But that being said, there is also a place for other traditional marketing, even if it's a newspaper ad that drives people to go and buy online, or drives people to pick up the phone and talk to you, or drives people to your shop to go and bang on the door and say, "Hey, I want to buy from you."
What about sales distribution channels? Dell Computers are famous for being the first PC manufacturer to sell their computers exclusively using an online channel. I mean, how does this strategy work?
Well, I think, to just clarify, Dell has never been exclusively online.
Oh.
What Dell has always been is exclusively direct. And what I mean by direct is it's a PC manufacturer that establishes direct relationships with its customers. So the only place that you could buy a Dell was through Dell. And a large part of that, particularly in recent years, has been done online. But a lot of the business has also gone on over the telephone. You need to note, though, that in the last few years, Dell have started moving into retail channels as well.
Track 7.
OK, so how does it work? I mean, how can you buy a PC online?
Well, the nice thing about this is it allows Dell to know exactly what their customers want and then build their customers' needs and wants to order. So you go online and you say, OK, I need a laptop. What do I need that laptop to do? Well, I need it to do X, Y and Z, and then Dell, through the website, will identify the right type of laptop for you. You might need faster memory because you might do a lot of graphics work or play a lot of games, or you might need a higher grade of memory than that, or a bigger screen, and so you can actually configure your PC to order and your services to order. It delivers on the classic dream of one-to-one marketing.
OK, you've explained the benefits to the customers, but what's the benefit to the company?
With this approach, the company does not need to hold stock. In its early days, Dell had lost money because they put a lot of stock in place and then realised that they'd invested in some technology that wasn't what the customers wanted. Dell learnt from that and is now very tightly integrated into suppliers, meaning that they don't have to hold stock. So you pick up your phone, you talk to Dell and you say, "I'd like this sort of laptop." It's then ordered into the Dell factory, who then go off and talk to Intel, AMD or whoever and say, this is the kind of chip that we need, this is the type of screen we need. Those guys then send that into Dell, it's assembled, then sent straight out to the customer, so they hold no stock.
You mentioned stock. Are there any other major advantages for the company selling direct online?
Yes. This approach cuts out the middleman, so it means that there's no Dell PCs sitting in people's shops. It also means that Dell can use the latest technology for their customers. It also means that Dell can cut costs, which are then reinvested back into the business to make it cheaper for the customers to go and buy a Dell PC.
Track 8.
Has this strategy been successful, though? Dell has now changed this strategy and is selling through high street shops. But why are we seeing this change of strategy?
Well, the strategy needs to change with the marketplace. So the traditional direct model has been incredibly successful for Dell in its traditional segments. Dell traditionally started off as primarily a business-focused PC manufacturer and service provider. So when they enter into a country, they will go in and they'll go for the biggest companies, and then they'll work their way down to the smaller companies. And those sort of businesses are very used to buying things direct and online because they get the best deal. It's an economic decision. It's not an emotional, psychological decision. However, Dell wanted to continue to grow their market share. By doing that, they wanted to get into the consumer space because that's where they were least dominant, and consumers, as we all know, behave very differently from businesses. There is more of a need to touch and feel the product, maybe to have a bit more of an emotional attachment to a product. And also, with a lot of people who aren't familiar with PCs and a little bit nervous about buying them, they need the reassurance of being able to look somebody in the eye.
Track 9. Slide 1.
Hi, my name is Philip Weiss, and I'm the Managing Director of ZN.
Slide 2.
Over the next 5 minutes, I'll give you a brief introduction of who we are, how we can help HQs meet their challenges, and what opportunities the internet created for them, and how we developed a methodology to think differently and execute online campaigns. And finally, we'll look at how we can help you.
Slide 3.
We're an e-marketing agency based in Brussels.
Slide 4.
And we focus specifically on helping international headquarters develop strategies on the internet. We've been around for 10 years. We have a small team of people from all different European countries, and we're really focused on creating and executing e-marketing campaigns for our clients.
Track 10. Slide 5.
So, what are the main challenges facing HQs today?
Slide 6.
Well, we've seen a big change in the role a headquarters had over the last 10 years. Effectively, they've moved from being an administrative hub to a real nexus of communication activity, and the web has actually played a dramatic role in reshaping the focus and the possibilities of HQ. Now, as everyone knows, there's tremendous competitive and budget pressure on every major international company today. There are also new demands from customers who want to be better informed, who have multiple channels that they want to use to get that information, and who really expect a faster response. There's also a tremendous increase of complexity. And new technology, new players, new customer expectations mean that headquarters have to reinvent their role and have to re-explore opportunities on a constant basis. And we look at how we can turn this complexity into an opportunity. Globalization is also making messages international at the click of a mouse and mean that your customer can see what's going on not only in the market that they live in, but, of course, across borders. So you need to adapt your messages and your strategy to that. It fundamentally creates a big opportunity because the internet can really be the instrument that a headquarters can use to meet these challenges.
Slide 7.
So how can we help you?
Slide 8.
The way we start our work is to focus first on understanding your business objectives and priorities, and really start from your reality. Because we need to understand what IT setup you have, what resources are in place, what's your current experience, and how we can take that and build a campaign that will deliver for your company and for your team in the long run. But we know that we need to start small and build campaigns step by step. But at the same time, we like to think big and have a strategic vision of where we're going. So we look at your specific needs in the short term, but fit them in a long-term strategy, and we help you to build that architecture and make your campaigns happen within that framework.
Slide 9.
If you're interested in pursuing this conversation, we look forward to hearing from you through email or phone.
Track 11.
OK, at this point, you'll have looked at lots of different brands that you could do for your projects. And the idea is that the symbols that are used to represent brands are so familiar to us, and they represent a whole lot of things to us that go beyond just the basic product. What I want to speak about today regarding branding is to look at definitions of a brand, identify the features of brands, and differentiate different types of brands that are there in the marketplace. And then we'll go on to look at the different types of strategic branding decisions that are made and consider some of the advantages of branding and good practice for branding.
Track 12.
Now, a clear distinction to make is between the basic product and a brand. A product is simply anything that satisfies customer needs. So it's something that has a functional value, a utility that hopes to satisfy our needs as consumers. But a brand goes that much further, and it's the name, term, symbol, design, or any combination of these which is used to identify good sorts of services and therefore differentiates them from other functional products on the market. OK, so this allows manufacturers, retailers and so on to have some way of grabbing our attention in these competitive marketplaces.
Track 13.
Now, there are a number of branding decisions that need to be made along the way, and we're going to look at each of these. So, first of all, you've got the branding decision. Do you brand something at great expense or do you not brand it? And your second decision is about who's going to be identified as the sponsor of the brand. Is it going to be a manufacturer brand, a distributor brand, a private brand, or a licensed brand? Now, there are some distinct advantages to branding, not just for the firm, but from the customer's point of view as well. From a customer's point of view, the fact that things are branded allows us to recognise the brands and the choices that we usually make. If you were to go round a supermarket and everything was unbranded and you had to start weighing up which were preferable products, it would be very difficult. From a consumer's point of view, it gives us fast recognition, but also an assurance of quality and performance. OK, we learn over time that we can trust some brands for certain things. And then there are emotional benefits, which add meaning or feeling to the offering. So there are some distinct benefits to consumers, which is why we like brands. From a firm's point of view, obviously the branding process increases profitability quite substantially. It allows them to charge premium prices. Again, you only need to look at the supermarkets. You look at the supermarket value range, the distributor's brand as opposed to the manufacturer's brand, and there's this big difference in price. Secondly, it tends to give you a higher market share and the ability to build market share. It gives you loyal customers so your income is more stable. The whole idea of brand is that people like what you're offering them. Therefore, they come back and choose your offering as they regard it as superior, and they choose it again and again. And when you talk about brand equity, it's about this issue of loyalty, how committed people are to that brand, and therefore you know how much it's worth to them. The fourth point is that it gives you avenues for future growth. And this is also linked to the fifth point if it gives you directions for segmenting markets. So, if you look at things like confectionery manufacturers, they produce things for children, for women, for men, for different eating occasions. It allows them to pursue alternative segments in markets, to target new groups and to target new occasions. The final point is that there's legal protection for brand names and trademarks. So when you've created some kind of customer alliance, because of the brand you are to some degree protected from the erosion of your market. Having said that, competitors come in with similar or superior positioned brands and it can start to erode your market quite dramatically. But it does give you some legal protection.
Track 14.
The standards focus really came into play as a company about a year ago. Our CEO, Mr. Ford, held a meeting in New York with the hotel managers. And they made a commitment that as a company, our goal and our aim has to be to improve our compliance with central standards. So we've committed ourselves that this has to happen. In a lot of our... No, I shouldn't say that. In some of our hotels, especially the long-serving hotels like London, there are employees that have been in their job for a number of years. You know, it's not rare, 15, 20, 25, 30 years in a job. And an example came up of a phone operator who works at one of our California hotels, because being a phone operator could be a position that a person has for a while. It's a stable job, and, you know, here's an example of an employee who the guests love. She's a pleasant enough person, gets good guest feedback and things, but just refuses to use the guest's name. And, you know, as a company, we're a company that manages with our heart first, and we're a people company. So we always would say, well, it's Amy, so we'll make an exception. You know, she's been here 20 years. Well, I'm here to tell you that the company's now saying, yes, we love our employees, and we still provide an excellent work environment for our employees, but standards are our life. Standards aren't just if you want to, if it's convenient for you, or when you want to do them. This is what we do. It's not an extra job. It is the job. And it's all of us. If I walk into reception and answer a telephone, it doesn't say that I don't have to use the guest's name. It says the guest's name will be used, when known, in a natural and discreet manner. There are no exceptions. It doesn't matter if it's a planning committee member, if it's a reservations agent, if it's Maria, if it's Georgina Powell. They have to do it. If I'm opening car doors at the front door, I say, "Welcome to the Laker Hotel." These are our standards. Period.
Track 15. Exercise 1. 1.
This is what we do. It's not an extra job. It is the job.
2.
Yes, we love our employees, but standards are our life.
Track 16. Exercise 3. 1.
We've committed ourselves that this has to happen.
2.
We're a company that manages with our heart first.
3.
We're a people company.
Track 17.
Can you tell me what services UIA offers?
Well, we're a low-cost carrier, we're a charter carrier, we're a cargo carrier. So we effectively serve all of those markets. The domestic market's important for us because we have to serve all of Ukraine, and Ukraine is a very big market of 46 million people. And freight, we make money carrying cargo in the belly hold of our passenger aircraft. But in addition to that, we want to develop a freighter network. We already have one 737 freighter, and we'll be adding more in the future. Our big question is always, how can we turn our skills into a revenue-generating activity? We set up our own passenger handling because we could do it better. And then we started to serve other customers, for example, British Airways, Austrian Airlines, KLM, Air France. So we were effectively then providing passenger handling for all of those companies. Then we had Swissport, the biggest handling company in the world. Their head office is in Zurich. They're in about 180 countries. And they came to us and wanted to participate in handling. So we sold 70% of the business and kept 30% and handed over the management of the business to them and let them grow it with us. So that's been a very successful strategy. Another strategy was we wanted to maintain our own aircraft because we wanted, obviously, to get the cost under control and have the quality under control. And we do all the heavy maintenance on our own aircraft. We're also providing third-party maintenance. That's third-party maintenance for airlines in Russia and the rest of the region, which is very good because it generates a profit stream as well. So we don't want to divert focus too much from our core business Because, obviously, you don't have the management resource to be running all these businesses.
No.
But what we do is, we'll keep bringing in partners, if necessary, for the peripheral businesses that would add value to the airline. But last year, the experts say that the whole airline industry itself lost about, well, they're saying $9 to $10 billion. And this year is going to be equally tough. So it's a crazy business. An industry in chaos.
Track 18.
How would you define price and cost?
Cost is what it costs you to put the product in the market. And you have to keep trying to get that unit cost down. A price is what the market will pay you. If the price is too high, people can't afford to travel. That's assuming you have a monopoly. If the price is too low, we can't make money. So our price is really determined more by competition, you know. And we always have to be competitive on price, or we're not in the marketplace.
Track 19.
And what costs are involved?
Well, there are unfortunately major costs that are outside our control. Fuel is a wonderful example. Fuel is the biggest cost. And the power of suppliers is a huge influence on cost, where you have fuel costs where there's more or less a monopoly. And there's aircraft. At the moment, we're in a position where the power is with the airlines in negotiating aircraft leases or negotiating aircraft purchase. And that's a cyclical thing. Sometimes there are troughs, like now, when supply is greater than demand. But 2 years ago, it was almost impossible to find good quality aircraft because the demand was greater than the supply. Now, today, if you're negotiating for aircraft, you can do very well. So the power of suppliers is a huge issue. What's important is also what is under your control. Under your control is labor costs, labor productivity, aircraft utilization. So all we've got to keep doing is try to increase the utilization of the resources under our control so that we get unit cost down. And then try and create competition where there's more than one supplier, more than one handling company. So we believe competition is very, very important. And that's one of the problems for our industry, that there's not enough competition.
Track 20.
I was dreading this meeting because I was thinking, oh, we're just going to be hearing all the bad things we didn't do right, blah, blah, blah. And now we get to the end and I feel great.
Well, I can say bad things about you if you want.
No, I thought it was a good way of leading the meeting.
Thank you.
Because, you know, it has to be addressed to us anyway.
Yes.
And every time we have a meeting with you, I don't know for everybody else, but for me it's very motivating. I really feel like going back to work and doing well.
That's good to hear. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Really, that's the effect the meeting should have.
Yes, that should be how we feel afterwards.
You know, it's no good sitting here telling everyone off. That's what they did in the past and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And I knew it wouldn't work. We want to come up with solutions, but also take responsibility and stick to the solutions that we decide now.
Yes.
And for me, it's like, you had your chance to speak your mind. If you didn't say what you think, then you missed the opportunity.
Yeah, then it's your problem.
Yeah, like some of you saying, you know, we don't have the right equipment. You know, the issue should have been raised at an earlier meeting.
That's true.
Speak up. In our monthly meetings, we need to speak about our problems and see if we can make improvements. Some things might not happen. Other things might happen, you know. Who would have thought that we could have wireless handsets?
Yeah.
We should get wireless keyboards and get proper equipment. Hannah isn't shy about spending money if it's for the guests. If we address it the right way, it will happen.
Great.
Okay, thank you both.
Cool.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Track 21. A.
Can I save this in my folder? Would you mind? Or is this valuable information?
B.
And I really thought you were in your early 50s.
C.
Magic. Looking good.
D.
Thanks for coming in, John.
E.
Oh, you didn't have to slam it.
F.
I'm sorry, I haven't done a copy of this one.
Track 22.
I was teaching economics in the Department of Economics, and we were going through a very rough period in Bangladesh. There was famine. So I was trying to see what little things I could do in the nearby villages. I made a list of people who were borrowing from loan sharks. I had 42 names on that list, and the total money they borrowed was $27. So my first action was to solve this problem by giving loans so that they didn't have to go back to the loan sharks and be exploited by them in a very ruthless way. Once I had done that, it created a lot of excitement among the people, and I wanted to continue with this. So I thought one way I could solve this problem would be by linking them with a bank located in my university campus. So when I went to the bank said they could not lend money to poor people, and it became a big struggle for me to persuade them. Eventually, I offered myself as the guarantor. I said, I'll become the guarantor, I'll sign all your papers, and you give the money, I'll take the risk. So that was the first time I got involved with a bank lending money to poor people. I had no idea whether people would pay back the money. I had no experience of that. And when I did that, I was amazed that every single penny came back despite the fact the bank was trying to persuade me that it would never happen. That encouraged me, and I wanted to expand, but the banks didn't want to support me. They said it was a matter of time, the whole thing would collapse because it didn't make sense.
Track 23.
The conventional banks are based on one basic principle. The more you have, the more you can get. So as a result, they became an institution which is focused on the bigger and bigger people, so that they can give more money, so that they can grow bigger. We reversed that principle. Our principle is this: the less you have, the more attractive you are for us. So we have reversed the basic principle of the bank thing itself. In order to create a completely new bank, we have to get rid of the whole idea of collateral. The whole idea of banking is that you must give something as a guarantee against which I can give you a loan. So if you don't pay back the loan, you lose that valuable property. But as a result, banks cannot go to the poor people because they cannot give you anything against which you can give the loan. We said, I don't need anything. I'll just give you a loan. It's a very scary thought. People get very nervous. How can I give him money if he doesn't give me anything? And that's what we do. We have no collateral, we have no guarantee.
Track 24.
And above all, we don't have any lawyers who check our loan contract with the borrowers. Imagine banking without lawyers. It's impossible to imagine. But we don't have lawyers. In conventional banks, you have to go to the bank. We reverse it. We say, people should not come to the bank should go to the people. So we go to the people all of the time. Every day, that's what we do. We have 27,000 staff in Grameen Bank. They don't sit in the office behind the desk. These 27,000 staff go to the villages, more than 80,000 villages in Bangladesh, to meet 7.5 million borrowers at their doorstep every week. The question everybody asks is, why do the people pay back? Are they crazy? They are not crazy. They are just people like us. They find out it is in their interest to pay back. We organize the system in such a way, it kind of focuses on the interest of paying back, the benefit of paying back. If you pay back one immediate thing, you see the bank is willing to lend you more. Having a credit channel opens doors. You can keep on taking money and move on forward. You pay back one loan, you are ready for another loan, and it goes step by step. We don't penalize anybody, that's another thing. There is no punishment. We don't sue anybody. That is very strange. We have no lawyers, no collateral, and no punishment, but still it works. We have a 99% repayment rate. That's a lot higher than commercial banks. We don't want to scare people. Also, we don't have any penalty interest rates. If you don't pay commercial banks within the set period, your interest rate will go up. We don't have that. So then why do they pay back? If they don't pay back, their door gets closed, meaning that they can't take any more loans. But if they do pay back, they don't have to go to the loan sharks. So that's a big incentive for them to keep the door open and to continue.
Track 25.
I'm sure you'll agree that our product is the best on the market.
I'm sure you'll agree. Our product is the best on the market.
Track 26. Part 1.
This is your victory. Now, I know you didn't do this just to win an election. And I know you didn't do it for me. You did it because you understand the enormity of the task that lies ahead. For even as we celebrate tonight, we know the challenges that tomorrow will bring are the greatest of our lifetime. 2 wars, a planet in peril, the worst financial crisis in a century. The road ahead will be long. Our climb will be steep. We may not get there in 1 year or even in 1 term. But America, I have never been more hopeful than I am tonight that we will get there. I promise you, we as a people will get there.
Track 27. Part 2.
There will be setbacks and false starts. There are many who won't agree with every decision or policy I make as president. And we know the government can't solve every problem. But I will always be honest with you about the challenges we face. I will listen to you, especially when we disagree. And above all, I will ask you to join in the work of remaking this nation the only way it's been done in America for 221 years. Block by block, brick by brick, calloused hand by calloused hand.
Track 28.
At the beginning of the year, we went through some big changes. I think we're in a position to really make some changes. I think we've got the right number of people. Well, not number perhaps, but the right people who are able to really improve what we're trying to do, which is customer satisfaction with support from our operations. There are 3 of us involved in it. I think there are 3.
What about the staffing issue?
I'm going to go through it. I'm going to give it to you from the top down, and then any questions come at the end. But if you feel strongly about some particular point I've covered, then please shout out. 3 guys in this area, myself, Janice Moore and Lisa Ross. Right, so, big change. We've got service and restoration in one team, and the advantage is a multi-skilled force. So we've got technicians, and we've got installation people working together. The planned project is going to need complex provision.
I have a question. Can you define complex provision?
Right, I should have put that at the beginning, shouldn't I? Right, so the field engineers take complex equipment into the...
Track 29.
There are many who won't agree with every decision or policy I make as president. And we know the government can't solve every problem.
Track 30.
How would you actually define corporate social responsibility?
Well, I guess the starting point is to say what it isn't. Corporate social responsibility isn't corporate philanthropy. Instead, it's a holistic approach that companies and organisations take to manage their business in a responsible manner. The 4 key components to the BBC's CSR policy focus on the impact the organisation has on the community, the physical environment, the marketplace and the workplace. CSR, however, goes beyond just addressing these issues. We need to look at how these factors are incorporated within the strategy of an organisation, how it's integrated into the company, and how transparent it is in disclosing information.
Track 31.
Can you give us some examples of how companies might act responsibly in the 4 areas of community, physical environment, marketplace and workplace?
Yes, sure. If we start with the first one, community, most companies tend to address that by doing something in their local community by way of charitable donations. In our case, we work and support local communities through employees volunteering. So we share the skills we might have with local communities and local community organisations and allow local communities to come into our business and find out a little bit more about what we're doing.
What about physical environment? Let's talk about that.
Yes, well, that I guess has been the one area that generated the most amount of interest. What companies are doing is looking at their environmental footprint in the round, which includes their CO2 emissions from travel, from the products they might be making, the buildings they might occupy, through to water use, energy use, etc.
Right. What about the marketplace and in the workplace in general?
Oh yes, the marketplace. Some companies specifically market their products as ethical products. Other companies are mindful of other issues too, and certainly in our case, how we advertise and promote our products. What impact they might have on younger people or children, for example. The supply chain is also an important part of this, and most consumers are now conscious of and aware of issues like child labour and enforced labour in manufacturing goods.
OK, and the workplace, the final area. I guess, as the name suggests, it's very much about the employment practices that a company has.
I believe it to be correct. One statistic is that nearly 70% of jobs in the UK are not advertised, and they're basically through friends and connections and networks, and that is deemed, certainly within corporate social responsibility, as not usually the best practice. Big companies like the BBC and others would have pretty clear guidelines and policies on its recruitment practices, ensuring that jobs are advertised appropriately, that there's a fair selection process, and the most talented individuals and the most suitable individuals are recruited for jobs.
Track 32.
Let's have a look at the business case. I mean, how far is the business case and the need to cut costs the main driving force behind organisations' CSR policies?
There has to be a business case for CSR, and it's not necessarily about cutting costs. It's about the long-term survival and health and profitability of the company. I do not think necessarily that companies would enter into a corporate social responsibility activity in order merely to cut costs. Obviously, for initiatives such as, for example, environmental policies, one of the clear benefits is that if you use less energy, then you cut your costs straight away. But in other examples then, there usually is a financial outlay. But in the long term, that can repay itself to a company.
So shareholders are only one of many stakeholders?
Absolutely, yes. I think that what corporate social responsibility has introduced is the notion that short-term profit gain isn't the only criteria by which you can measure the success of a company.
Track 33.
Some people say that CSR is little more than corporate gloss and public relations. What would you say?
I can understand that there are arguments for and against a company using its CSR activities as a marketing tool for building reputations, but I think on balance there is a role for companies to do this. And I guess the cooperative banks strike me as one of the foremost examples of where their practices mirror their marketing and of how you perceive that company. And so I don't think we should necessarily automatically criticise any attempt that a company might make to tell its customers and others about its CSR credibility as mere gloss.
So it's not so much corporate gloss, but good public relations to communicate a company's CSR policy.
That's right. And I think it's a good thing as long as there is truth in that. So what the company is actually telling its customers and others about is actually a true and accurate reflection of what it's actually doing. And in some cases, that might not be the case, and hence the criticism that this is mere gloss.
Right.
For example, a car manufacturer suddenly proclaiming that a car that they've manufactured for the last 5 years is suddenly green, and they've done very little to actually change it, but certainly the marketing has got green images and green language associated with the car, but the car itself hasn't substantially changed. Then I think most customers see through it, and many of those adverts have been picked up by the Advertising Standards Authority as well for this wrongful advertising or misleading advertising.
The classic case of greenwashing.
Precisely.
Track 34.
Hello?
Good morning, it's John here from Latin America Holidays.
Yes, hi.
I'm calling about your honeymoon trip to Peru and Ecuador. My colleague Eleanor's been communicating with you, and I know she's away on holiday this week. Lucky girl.
Oh, very nice too.
Congratulations, by the way, on getting married.
Oh, thank you. I can't believe it's only 3 weeks away.
Track 35.
Hi, Sarah. Ken here.
Hi, Ken. Good to hear from you. Everything okay?
Yes, very good. Just calling about sorting out the brochure.
Okay.
It's just that it's not finished at the moment.
Oh, okay.
But we also need to try and get down on paper what our mission is as clearly as possible. Do you agree?
What do you suggest we change? I thought it was ready.
Okay, but there are 3 headings there. The first one is leadership, then communication, and then sustainable tourism, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to...
Track 36.
Yeah, I'm not totally happy with the next one, which is sponsorship with local projects, because that implies to me a greater involvement than we have at the moment.
Sure.
And I suppose what you're trying to say is that we are just producing guidebooks, helping raise awareness of areas of national parks. But you're not actually directly giving money back to the community as such.
Okay, good point.
Okay. Well, I'll change that to support if sponsorship is too strong a word, so that's fine.
Good, yes, absolutely.
All right. I'll still play around with it and try and send that off to you a bit later.
That's wonderful, Ken. Do you think it'll be a success?
I do, definitely. Okay?
Well, thanks, Ken. Great job.
Cheers, Sarah.
Track 37.
In your opinion, what makes a good strategist?
Somebody who can listen. You need to listen to the people within a company, but also listen to the signals and understand the signals in that industry as a whole.
Right.
I think the ability to analyse lots of information and get the answers directly from that information is important. Communication is also important.
Yes.
And I think it's important that you can come up with ideas. And that's a part of strategy, but a good strategist is somebody who can actually communicate all of this and then put it into practice.
Right. So you're saying it's basically listening, analysing and communicating. Are there any qualities that you think a bad strategist would have?
To be uncertain. I think you can take time over a decision, but I think once you've decided on a course of action, you need to take it. You do listen to people, but you don't manage by democracy as such. You listen to them, and that affects the way you move forward in the right direction. But you can't chop and change all the time. Otherwise, you lose confidence, and confidence is key.
Track 38.
How did the company get to where it is now?
Abercrombie and Kent was set up in Africa in 1962 by Jeff Kent and his parents. And it grew because it focused on 2 things. Firstly, it was innovative, and secondly, it gave great service to its clients. I think they have been 2 of its core premises, and these qualities have held it in good stead over the years.
Okay, I see. Can you tell us about the strengths and weaknesses of the company at the moment?
One of the strengths of the company, definitely at the moment, is its staff. A&K is different from most companies in that it has a network of offices around the world.
Yes.
Many other operators sublet and subcontract their services to ground agents, whether they be in Kenya, Peru or China, whereas A&K actually have offices in over 35 countries.
Right.
And that's a key strength. A high standard of service is maintained throughout the world wherever you go. The weakness is possibly that it's a luxury brand. So A&K are trying to prove that we give value for money.
Right. What are the company's objectives for the next 5 years?
We're really trying to stress our level of service. So we go back to our clients, our database, the public, and stress that we give the very best service. And it's very personal, in that what we do is all tailor-made. It's all bespoke. And that's going to be one of the key things, delivering service. I think there's a lot of tour operators out there, a lot of companies, but not all of them have the level of service that we can offer, and they will not have the expertise that we have or the network that we have.
I see. Is there anything else about opportunities and threats that you can see over the next 5 years?
I think the internet's certainly a double-edged sword.
Yes.
On one hand, it gives the user access to a huge amount of travel ideas and travel suggestions, places around the world that just weren't available some 10 years ago. That's a threat to us on one side. Obviously, there's a lot of competition. There are some small niche operators who can set up one-man bands and become very specialist out of their back garden almost. And their overheads are perhaps lower than ours, but they don't have the network. On the other hand, the internet is a cost-effective way of us accessing lots of clients as well. I think in the past, us and other operators have relied heavily on brochures, which are costly in terms of finance to produce, in terms of the opportunity cost, the time that you have to put into them, and also, I think, costly to the environment in terms of paper.
Yes.
Even though we try and do reuse paper that's sourced from sustainable sources.
Do you have anything to say about how A&K can achieve your objectives?
Well, travel is an amazing industry to work in, as travel gives people wonderful experiences that can be wonderfully diverse.
Yes.
And it's trying to get that across and being more experiential in what we say to people, rather than just having a list of countries or a catalogue of hotels. You sort of say, let's give a bit more to the clients and an idea, a flavour of what they might be able to see and do. I think it's experience your travel, as opposed to just flying and flopping as such.
What's that? Flying and flopping?
A fly and flop holiday is where you stay in one place and don't do very much for a week or two.
Track 39.
Have you ever had an interview for a job that went badly?
Yes. When I was about 24. I went for an interview as a cafe manager in London. And so the morning of the interview, I got dressed up in my suit and tie and I went along to the interview. And then, just before I went in, I checked the information I had been given. And it said, please dress casually for this interview. Don't wear a suit.
Oh, so did you get that job?
No, I didn't.
Track 40.
The only other comment I've got is from when I went to Bond Street.
Oh, yes?
For the laser treatment.
Oh, really?
There was a lady there that I was talking to who was having the same tests and things done as me. And it's quite interesting to get comments from somebody who doesn't work for the company.
Yes.
To see what other people think about us. She'd come all the way from Eastbourne to Bond Street to have a consultation.
Right.
I asked her what she thought about the treatment, and she said she had thought about having laser surgery done before, but wasn't sure about how safe it was. She said the thing that made her come was because it was our company.
Excellent.
And she says because we're doing it, she thought it must be all right. And I thought it was nice to be told that.
And she didn't know you worked for this company?
She didn't, though I did say afterwards.
Right.
But she didn't know when she told me.
Track 41.
How was it, the whole experience?
Well, it's supposed to take an hour and a half. When I got there at 1:20, they were already running over an hour behind, which is not very good if you've got a train to catch. Fortunately for me, somebody didn't turn up, because I actually wouldn't have stayed for my appointment. I would have had to have come away without the consultation, which I wouldn't have been very happy about. Because there are lots and lots of tests that I had to have done, and at the end of it, they put stuff in to make your pupils dilate.
Right.
I could only see through a quarter of my eye, and I looked super scary, as James put it.
Oh.
And I couldn't even see my watch to tell the time.
Oh.
My sight was so blurry.
That must have been a weird experience.
Yeah, it was really weird. I just wanted to close my eyes and go to sleep.
So you've had all the tests done, but have they said if you can have the treatment?
They've said yes, I can have it done.
So when do you go and get the treatment?
Well, I can go when I want, but I can't afford it at the moment.
Maybe when you get your bonus.